Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're always glad to have this widely followed returning guest. Andy Schectman is the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. He joins us today, and this is an unusual time. Thank you for joining us. And an unusual day. Usually we were doing Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, but we've shifted to Wednesday. Today is Wednesday, and we're doing it at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific. We're going to try to stick with this time slot going forward. So sorry for the adjustment to those of you who didn't get the memo, but to those of you who are here, you must have figured it out. And we did put it out in our newsletter, which is a reminder. Those of you who are not yet subscribers to our free, did I mention free newsletter? Go to libertyandfinance.com. Just put in your email address, click submit. You'll get every email that we put out, which is once per day with every guest and our weekly specials. Andy, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
It's good to be here, Dunnigan. Thanks for having me, buddy. The world's a little crazy these days, isn't it?
I think the only wrong word in that sentence is little.
Yeah.
The world's not a little bit crazy. The world's spinning out of control. It's been going on for a long time. We've been getting calls from clients who are saying, gee, Dunnigan, I was watching you back years ago and I thought the world was going crazy, but now it's really going crazy when we have basically lies being told to us by almost every official source that we can turn to, whether it's politically, medically, whether it's having to do with finance and banking, today we're going to dig into the lies we're being told about what's going on with who's buying the gold. And so maybe we should start there. We're going to get to some questions on the live stream. And folks, if you would like to ask a question of Andy live, make sure that you're on YouTube right now and that you're subscribed to Liberty and Finance. If you forgot to subscribe, just click subscribe. You can jump right into the live chat that's going on right now, and you can ask questions, and we'll garner from those during this interview. And Andy, we'd like to start there if you would kick us off. It's been quite widely spoken about and written about over the last quarter or so that the rise in gold to setting new nominal highs over the past quarter was driven on the back of outpaced demand from physical buying of precious metals by China, both from the official government and from the people of China. And then we were told that the pullback in gold price, which, believe it or not, was only 1% off of its all-time nominal high, was due to a cessation of that official buying of Chinese gold in June and July. But more recently, we've been getting indications that perhaps that's not the whole story. And you've intimated about that in our previous visits here, but it sounds like you've done some more digging into it and have some more revelations for us. So true or false, China stopped buying gold for the last couple of months, and that's why there's been a pullback in the gold price.
No, completely false. And they were convincing in the way they did it by reversing the arbitrage situation with gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Silver still is offering that arbitrage, but right around the end of July, we saw, in fact, COMEX gold futures were actually a little bit higher than the Shanghai prices. And that fell in line with what they were trying to do. And look, first of all, just to recap some of the things I've talked about before about this, before I tell you what I read about it really being false and evidence of it, is that for my whole career, everyone said you can't believe what they're telling you, that they're, it's been known that they're the largest producers in the world, and they make or produce between 300 and 500 metric tons a year. And you just add that up for the last 25 years, and you're well above the numbers of 2,600 metric tons or whatnot that they tell us. But most of my career, I mean, Donegan, I've been doing this for 34 years, and I can remember vividly most of my career, everyone saying the numbers that the Chinese are telling us, and usually it was stuck at 1,200 metric tons for, I don't know, for a long time. You can't believe it. They're not updating the numbers. You have the IMF saying their numbers are fugazi. You have the head of research for Bank of Montreal said their numbers are massively understated, and they are understated. They have been. Why would they want to be forthright? In particular, when we see the new unit settlement currency that has been evidently, according to Delma Rousseff, the head of the BRICS New Development Bank, agreed on in principle, 40% gold backing. Why would they want to be honest about how much gold they're buying? Before I get there, let's just look at the fact I've done 2 interviews recently with mining executives and talked with both of them about China buying things up quietly. Now, I've said that the commercial banks that work on behalf of the PBOC have been buying gold incessantly and not reporting it to the IMF in their dealings with the refineries in South Africa and in Switzerland. That's been obvious. I think they're doing things in a very covert manner. But what I learned recently is that the Chinese are going through Latin America right now and buying up all the silver concentrate and the silver doré bars, unrefined, all of it, buying up, paying out as much as twice what the Western bidders are bidding, paying twice what they will bid, bringing it home and refining it at home, where buying all of this stuff in unrefined form it doesn't have an effect on the price. It's not coming off of an exchange. So they are going to great lengths to mask what they're buying and how much they're buying. They're using the manipulation on COMEX and the LBMA to mask what they're buying and how much they're buying. They would have no vested interest really at all. It would be stupid to tell everyone how much gold that they are trying to buy. And really, I mean, how much more forthright are we, where we haven't updated the numbers at Fort Knox, or had them audited rather, since 1953, and turned down Ron Paul every time he asks to have it audited. So it doesn't make any sense, to be honest about it. But there was an article that I read, and I think it was from Koos Jansen. He's a hell of a researcher. And he said, because the bullion banks take care of the gold transport for the PBOC, the shipments from London to Beijing are disclosed in UK customs data. The customs data reveals that the PBOC continued to buy gold in May when it communicated to the market it discontinued buying at it. And, so this is the thing. You can see the efforts they are going or taking, even going as far as decreasing the arbitrage premium on the Shanghai Gold Exchange to really make it look like they stopped buying it. But in essence, what did it do? It drove the price down. And the Western media, who's so stupid as it pertains to telling us what's really happening, well, they were all over, Reuters and all of the news channels were all over the fact that Chinese stopped buying gold, and that's got to be bad for the gold market. You never hear anything positive. It's always, even if it is positive, it's spun with a little bit of whipped crap on top of it for dessert. And they never, ever are bullish about gold because it is the antithesis of the system. So the media, after 18 months of the Chinese finally updating their numbers repetitively, and they stop, they're all over it saying they stopped buying. And I said, that's just a lie. I've been saying that on your show and everyone else. They're not stopping buying. In fact, these export numbers prove it. But I think people need to understand that this is an all-out rush. And when you see the effort that they are going to, like going through Latin America and paying double what everyone else will pay for unrefined doré in silver and silver concentrate, to ship it home at tons per, tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of this stuff, the cost of shipping it and refining it they're okay with that. They've been mining gold that has been very uneconomical for a long time, using our trade imbalance. And so to them, it's money. And to them, they see the big picture. They think in terms of decades. Now, the BRICS has been going on for 18 years. This is not just a trend that is just beginning. And like you said at the onset here, things are spinning faster and faster and faster. I use that toilet paper roll analogy all the time. They are spinning faster, 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 faster. Look, we got this massive BRICS meeting in October, and the admission of Dilma Rousseff, Sergei Glaziev, and Putin that they've agreed in principle to a new currency, that is, a special meeting is being called for ratification of this in September in China, with the intention of perhaps rolling it out in October. What does that do to the system? And then you have the biggest election of our career, and let alone this knucklehead, Tim Walz, who's now the VP choice for Harris. I left Minnesota because of this guy. And this guy's left of left. This guy destroyed Minnesota. This guy let the city burn down. There's just so much happening, and it's going faster and faster and faster and faster. You have to keep your eye on the ball. And that is the fact that the biggest money in the world is doing everything they can to accumulate commodities and be opaque about it. This is not about transparency yet. Once they've accumulated everything, then we move to a new system, as Zoltan Pozsar calls it, Bretton Woods 3 that will be all about transparency. But until we show our hand, there's no reason to be honest. It's bluff, 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 because otherwise you get traded out of your position
Mhm.
as fast as information disseminates around the world nowadays on social media. Uh, it would certainly not be in their best interest to tell the world what their ambitions are. In fact, anything but that.
We talked about that last time where we've been told the exact opposite of what's actually been going on, and that's necessary sometimes in business to be very clandestine about what you're doing because otherwise you just shoot yourself in the foot. You can't accomplish your objective. If the herd finds out that's your goal, then they may front run it, and you can't get it done. The way you were describing this, though, it just seemed this eerie mirror image. Opposite of what's been going on for years on the COMEX. We've been talking to, as you know, uh, Murphy from the GATA antitrust
Bill
org. We
Murphy,
talked to
yeah.
Bill Murphy. We talked to Ted Butler when he was with us. We talked to Ed Steer more recently, and they keep talking about how this false dichotomy of paper futures contracts being just dumped on at the worst possible times on the market to intentionally move the price with no valid reason for hedging. And you would never do it that way. If you were trying to accomplish a legitimate goal of hedging a long position, that kind of thing, or some physical inventory, you would never, ever do it in that way. It was done in the most ridiculous way that was so glaringly obvious for effect and for to move the price. And then you talk about this mirror image of that, which is the opposite, which is China finding the most sideways way off the exchanges, off the books, uh, to get the physical, to get the tons and tons and tons of physical without moving the price. I mean,
That's right.
isn't that an interesting dichotomy of those two exactly
And they're
opposite
very shrewd.
strategies?
And that's the difference now, Dunnigan. And I love that you phrase it that way and mirrored it that way. That's great. And it's true. And but that's really where we are at right now. This is a high stakes game. This is about repositioning. And there's no reason to believe that any of them will be honest about it in their aspirations. But the reason they're not bitching, those countries, is because they're accumulating. They're using this
Mhm.
against us. They're using it against us. And, I think that the manipulation that we see, the drive-by shooting that we've seen on Comex over the last
Mhm.
couple of weeks, where they knock the price down, and you can only imagine they fleece the managed money. You can only imagine how much managed money selling has been then switched into commercial bank buying. This is the rinse, wash, and repeat cycle they do all the time. They suck in all of the hedge funds and the speculative buying by the managed money. They absorb it, and once it slows down, they step on the price, and it flips. And then they create all of the margin calls, and people sell. And look, these hedge funds have investors that they have to appease, so they're not in it to absorb pain. They're in it to make a profit and get out when it flips the other way. But that's what's happening, and this is being used against us because, like I said, these countries are incentivized, coordinated, wealthy, sophisticated, and they know this is how you beat us. You don't beat us in a war with missiles and airplanes and aircraft carriers. You beat us by blowing up the biggest commercial banks on the planet because they're stupid enough to be naked short massive, massive, massive amounts. And that will happen at some point. I'll tell you what else I think is going to happen. And I do really, truly believe this, Dunnigan. I think there's going to come a time where there's going to be something that wakes up the very, very, very wealthy people in this country. We're
Mhm.
starting to see it. The order sizes that we're doing now are really
Mhm.
big. We don't have the massive amount of volume that we saw in other parts of the last 3 years, where,
Mhm.
the silver squeeze and the everyone just getting a piece of it to make a whole
Mhm.
bunch of money. And it's not sexy enough. The instant gratification is not there in gold and silver yet for those people. And so they've moved on to things like Bitcoin and Nvidia and Apple. Okay, I get it. Fine. But what we have seen is very, very substantial orders. And I swear to you, I've said this before, I believe there's going to come a time where you get some very wealthy people. I don't know how many billionaires are there in the United States now. What, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000? I don't know, a lot. You're going to get a couple of very wealthy people that say, give me every single thing you have right now. I'll take it all. And you're going to get people that will do that across the country, and bang, it'll all be gone. And I mean that. because
Mhm.
there will be a wake up call, and you can see it. You can see it with what happened on Monday morning. And again, I always say you'll wake up to a new reality on Monday morning. Shocking it happened on Monday morning. Shocking that all of these insiders sold their shares leading up to the biggest one day drop in the history of the Dow Jones. And the razor's edge that we are living on, where the Bank of Japan says they're going to raise rates a little bit, and as a result, you start to blow things up. The biggest one-day decline on the Japanese Nikkei, the biggest point drop ever in the history of the Dow Jones. And many of the, like for example, the worst day in 57 years in Taiwan, the biggest drop in South Korea since 2008. This wasn't just isolated. And now Japan says, well, we're not going to raise rates anymore. Everything will be okay. It'll go back to normal. We're that close. And as we said a few weeks ago, an eighth of an inch separated chaos and calm. Do we really think it's going to be calm leading up to what amounts to the biggest high stakes election in the history of this country? And even no matter who wins, is it going to be calm after that, or is it going to be more chaos? Maybe they're able to keep the lid on things until the election, and then it just goes nuts. I don't know. But I do believe we're getting late in the game. And I think the biggest issue people will face will be getting metal. Because when the biggest, most well-funded and well-informed money on the planet is going to these great lengths to siphon away everything, including Doré bars and concentrate in unrefined form to not move the market, what's going to happen when it just becomes obvious, painfully obvious, that this is the direction that the world is going, that there is no safety in traditional assets and precious metals take on a whole new image with wealthy people in this country? I think it's going to happen. In fact, I would bet my life on it. And I don't say that
Mhm.
to inject urgency. I just say it because I really do believe it. And we're starting to see much larger orders and concern from very wealthy people that, we would never see that back in the days. You get one or two orders like that a year. Now they're happening every week. And that's what's different now, at least from this side of the table. The volume has
Mhm.
been low. It's starting to heat up. I think people
Mhm.
feel something is wrong. People feel it. They're tingling, even if you can't articulate it. There's just craziness everywhere. And, I mean, just turn on the news and watch it for 10 minutes and you'll see.
The awareness that I think you may be talking about is something that's been, I'm embarrassed to admit in front of all of our viewers who've been with us since 2013 and Reluctant Preppers and all that. I'm embarrassed to admit how entrenched I have been in normalcy bias, because just over the past month, like each week, I wake up with like, I can't tell if I was dreaming or if I was just kind of thinking and half dreaming. Awareness is about, oh my gosh, like retirement has nothing to do with how many dollars you have, it how many ounces you have. And the saying that you know uh, our good friend who's always with us when we have him on, Bill Holter, talking about when people ask him the question of how much is enough precious metals, he said, well,
Whatever you don't want to
how much do you
lose.
not want to lose? I always thought, well, that's kind of a flip answer, and then I thought, well, that's kind of an answer that a fellow broker might give. And then it's been dawning on me, oh my gosh, I understand what he's talking
I'll tell
about.
you something.
It's the
He's one
real
of my
thing.
best friends, Dunnigan, and he is the least full of crap person I've ever met. When he says something, he means it. He really, truly means that. And he is a straight shooter, as more so than any person I've ever met in this industry. He's a straight shooter.
And the thought process behind that, it's like it just there's so much cognitive dissonance with everything that we've been told from any official source for our entire lives. And that is that, nothing in the banks is yours. That's the truth of the Dodd-Frank Act. You've made that painfully clear to us. When if people who are watching this haven't seen the leaked video where the excuse me, the
FDIC.
FDIC meeting is talking about, we can't let this kind of discussion happen outside this room. We need to be very selective about, we have to talk about this amongst ourselves
Create
with the
panic,
bank
yes.
owners, because it would create unintended consequences if the public heard about runs on the bank are going to be inevitable. And then you read to us from the Dodd-Frank Act of 2010 that it can take 3 to 5 years if you get reimbursed your losses in there by the FDIC, et cetera. We saw what happened with those three major bank collapses last year, the second, third, and fourth largest bank failures ever in the history of the United States. And then the university study that said there's another 280 banks that are in as bad or worse situation than those banks were. And now we've been hearing from Alistair McLoud, who I just interviewed this week. He'll be on later this week talking about how banks are under this combination of pressure from underwater bond portfolios due to the interest rate increases, underwater commercial, dead toxic commercial loans from companies that are zombie companies, can't even repay their debts, certainly can't refinance them at higher rates, and companies are just walking away from their corporate headquarters and stuff that they don't need anymore. You've talked about that as well. So, and then, oh, by the way, David Webb's book, Nothing,
The
You'll
Great
Own Nothing,
Taking.
talking the great taking, and talking about nothing in the brokerage account is yours either. So let's see. Wait a minute. Let's go
Well,
down the list.
speaking of brokerage accounts, by the way, on Monday when everything collapsed, it's interesting that Charles Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard, TD Ameritrade, E-Trade, CenturyLink, Interactive Brokers, and Robinhood were all down.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Oh
that's
yeah. I had a
interesting. They're
client talking
all
to me.
down. Hmm.
Yep. Yeah. Client specifically talking about trying for 3 hours to make a trade with Schwab, and it was absolutely unavailable.
Yeah, and that's unacceptable. Unavailable is unacceptable in a market that's collapsing.
Hmm.
And, thank goodness for circuit breakers, maybe when that happens. But I remember during COVID, I said to my nephew, I said, listen, man, just pull your money out, sit on the sideline, for your 401k. He works for a big corporation in Minneapolis. I said, just take it out and sit on this. Let's just let things simmer down a little bit. And he was with Fidelity, and he called, and he was on hold for 2 hours on a Thursday. They finally came back and said, listen, we're too busy. We have to set up an appointment. Someone will call you next Tuesday. So over the weekend, Monday, Tuesday, and this was a 401k, for a big, I think it was Fidelity. I'm almost positive.
Hmm.
But it was a big group like that,
Hmm.
Vanguard, Fidelity, whatever it was. But he couldn't get through. Waited 2 hours and then told it would have to be Tuesday. That's the point. And when you think about these things, like Bill says, whatever you don't want to lose, or when people say, it's not, if you don't own it, you don't hold it, you don't own it. I mean, those kind of things are trite and whatever. But if you think about how that could play out in reality, there's a lot of truth in that. And saying that gold is an asset that has no counterparty liability if it's in your own possession, there's truth in that.
Hmm.
So it doesn't mean it has to be taken to the nth degree. Maybe it does. But I will, as far as Bill it goes, he means that. And he means
Hmm.
that sincerely. And I'm not the poster child for Finance 101 either. I have more gold and silver than anyone would say I should own. But to me, it's not an investment. That's where the delineation is for me, is that it is not an investment. It's wealth. My investments would be my mining shares and a little bit of money I have in U.S. Treasuries. Those are my investments.
Hmm.
My gold and silver, which I have way more than people would ever think you should, to me, is wealth. And it's money in the bank without the risk that we just talked about.
One of the things that you talked about when you've introduced this topic of the clandestine ways that China was obtaining metals without going through the major exchanges, making it obvious, over the past couple of months, was you said that they have accounts that are called gold revaluation accounts. And now you said that that's even appearing, sticking its head up even in the US. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, on every balance sheet across the globe, the gold in central bank balance sheets is held in what's called a revaluation account. And it's weird, the way that they have the rules set up. I'm not sure really why they do it this way, but they have the gold in their balance sheet on the asset side and the revaluation account, which mirrors it on the liability side. The rule is you can't offset a liability with your gold, and for whatever reason, it's still valued at 35 bucks an ounce across all of Europe, as an example. The Bretton Woods number. Now, I'm not sure. I used to know. I mean, it's been so long that why they moved the U.S. price up to 42.22. I don't remember exactly why, but suffice it to say, the official price in the United States is 42.22 on the books. And you got the head of the Dutch National Bank who keeps talking about this. He keeps talking about revaluing gold. In fact, I think I can pull up here really quick. I think, bear with me. I'm going to do this as fast as I can. I just read something today from it. He says, let's see, the head of his name is Klaas Knot. And in October of 2022, He is the head governor of Dutch Central Bank. He said the balance sheet of the Dutch Central Bank is solid because, make this bigger so I can actually read it, is solid because we also have gold reserves, and the gold revaluation account is more than 20 billion euros, which we may not count as equity, but it is there. Now, it's interesting to understand that when we talk about the revaluation account, that, you know, why do they give it that name, I guess, first and foremost? Why would they give it the name of a revaluation account if it wasn't something that they noticed? And I think it's option number 4, right? And option number 1 for the Fed would be to inflate, the way all governments have done. And option number 2 would be to default. Option number 3 I focused on for the last 4 years, and that was incite the world to no longer trust the United States, to no longer have a need to use the dollar for oil, to sign an executive order to go green, to stabilize the country, weaponize the dollar in the Treasury market, and have everyone dump dollars. There's something called Operation Sandman that people should Google. Over 100 plus countries in theory, and I don't know how true this is or not, but Mike Adams sure thinks it is, and he's a smart guy, that they've all agreed at one point to flip the switch, and it would happen at night is the way that it's written down, the night of the switch they call it, where in unison they will all dump US dollars in treasuries. Now, if all of a sudden Project Enbridge and the unit token get ratified and it comes out in October, I mean, it is not beyond the scope of my imagination to see that come to fruition. The slowly, little by little by little by little divestiture of dollars and treasuries, which we have seen, is positioning, and the accumulation of commodities like gold, which has doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury for 25 years with no counterparty risk. It's happening. So all of these countries, and we're supposed to be, the United Kingdom is now going to be the biggest purchaser of our treasuries, along with Ireland and the Cayman Islands. I got some oceanfront real estate to sell you in Minneapolis if you believe that that really is legit. It's not legit. I mean, Jim Willie says they're paying them under the table. I don't care what it is. One broke nation buying the debt of another broke nation is just not really smart. And it shouldn't be even considered an asset. But it is, and it won't be the way things are going. It looks like the way that, if indeed the unit comes about and you don't need to hold treasuries because gold is outperforming it with no counterparty risk and will be the primary component of a new settlement currency, you don't need to hold dollars either that are being inflated away by $100,000 a second. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's $1 trillion every 100 days. 100 grand a second is being pissed away and bankrupting your grandchildren and my children and all of these people that are working their tail off right now only to be indebted by fiscal irresponsibility. So the dollar's days are numbered ultimately, as are the Treasury. I do believe that. So as we talk about the gold revaluation account, to me, that's option number 4. You just revalue the price of gold as high as it possibly can go, legitimately, and write off your debt. Now, even in the case of the U.S., it's pretty bad because every $4,000 increase in the price of gold, if we have 261 million ounces, would result in $1 trillion that could go free and clear into the Treasury account, the TGA. So you raise it to $20,000, that only gives you $5 trillion free and clear to go into the Treasury. And we're still, you know, we have 35 trillion in debt and 150 trillion in unfunded liabilities. So it's not a magic pill, but it certainly helps. Anyways, getting back to your point. Trump spoke at the Bitcoin meeting. And right after he spoke at the Bitcoin meeting, there was a lady who spoke, and her name, Senator Cynthia Lummis was her name. And Cynthia Lummis proposed funding the strategic Bitcoin reserve by partially revaluing the Federal Reserve's gold. And she wrote a bill to do this. And she's talking, I mean, so now you got the West talking about it. She says that Treasury Secretary with no congressional approval needed, that would be our friend Janet, could instruct the Fed Chair Jerome to revalue U.S. official gold, which mechanically creates a deposit into the U.S. Treasury General Account, TGA, free and clear. The Treasury can spend as it sees fit. And Senator Lummis's proposal is revaluing the gold and taking some of that excess money and using it to buy Bitcoin for a strategic Bitcoin account. The point I want to get across is they know it's there. Now, the question is our gold really there? Is the 261 million ounces really there? Hasn't been audited for a very long time, but I find it ironic that they call it the gold revaluation account. It's almost too ironic to not be applied. Again, too stupid to be stupid. I don't know. It just seems like they have that in their back pocket. So I think that's something to watch. Look, when you see China raise the price of silver by $4, that's not revaluation, but it just goes to show that the real price is what someone will pay for it. So all of these Western countries, and all of these, including China, they're all accumulated massive amounts of debt, and they're all buying gold. So why not revalue it? It gets your balance sheet in order.
Mhm.
And now gold goes way up here. It's used to peg to a new system. It never comes back down. And you know who used to say that? God rest his soul, Jim Sinclair. He said gold will go to a level that no one would ever expect. It will be pegged to a new system and it will never come back down. And maybe he will be right, be proven right. I think he underestimated. I think his number was 10,000. James Rickards is saying 27,000. Who knows how high it will go? But I do believe you can only pee in the punch bowl so long before everyone says, I'm done drinking that. And you need to do something to inspire confidence. And that is gold and blockchain technology that is coming. That's why all of these banks are buying gold and repatriating it, central banks. That's why you're seeing them go to great lengths to blur and to use the suppression against us to massively accumulate and de-dollarize until something like Operation Sandman happens, where you wake up on a Monday morning, just like we did this last Monday, to see the Nikkei get hammered. Instead, it will be the dollar in the Treasury market that open limit down immediately. So hope it doesn't happen, but I'd bet pretty strongly that it does. Some form, something like that.
Another phrase that's been coming back to me, in addition to the ones that I was slowly waking up to over the past month here, is that in a deep recession, depression, there is no way to not lose, but those who lose the least
Least.
are those who are, that's the best you can hope for.
He or she who loses least wins. And
Yeah.
Richard Russell used to say that all the time, and it's true. He or she, everyone's going to lose in that environment. But what gold offers in that environment, and there was a report written by a man named Roy Jastrom, I think, if I remember. God, I can't believe I can pull out names like that. Can't remember to zip up my zipper all the time. My wife says, always yelling. I don't know why I don't do it, but I can remember Roy Jastrom's name. He was a economist, I think, from University of Alabama or Georgia, and he wrote a report that basically said gold performs best in a deflationary, depressionary scenario because it has no counterparty liability, because it is wealth, free and clear
Mhm.
of any counterparty. And so we've all been told gold and silver do best in, or gold anyway, it does best in inflationary times. Sure, it does good, but in a deflationary time where everything is collapsing and trust is collapsing in particular, gold is trustless. It inspires confidence and trust. So whether it's inflation or deflation, depression or hyperinflation, if you're not a contrarian, you're damn well bound to be a victim. And if you are fully invested in dollars, you're destined to go broke, period, when this breaks, period. End of story. And I wish it weren't that way, but it's becoming more obvious and faster and faster and faster. And the decisions that we are making becoming dumber and dumber and dumber. It just seems like the inevitability of the rubber meeting the road in some form of a reset, some form of a system moving from the west to the east is bound to happen. And I guess only time will tell. The world is very fluid. A lot of things can happen to change that, but I would certainly wouldn't be fully invested in dollars and not hedge that position with something like precious metals, not to become wealthy, but because it is wealth and has been forever. And the central banks are proving that.
I wanted to share a comment. This isn't a question, but we had Gerald Draper on the live chat saying, no matter what happens, the prediction is pain. Best to be prepared. The have-nots will not be where you want to be. And this gets back to what you're saying is have something real. And again, talking to a longtime coworker and friend who had been said that his family in India, where we know there's a cultural affinity for gold and maintaining wealth generationally that way, had survived for 2 generations on the store of gold that his grandfather had put in the small safe in the living room.
Mhm.
And the grandmother kept the family going, got all the kids through graduate school, so they all became doctors and lawyers and all these kind of things, and kept the family going on that little nest egg. The problem is, as my wife keeps asking me, when will we be able to be financially independent, that kind of thing. Looking at that, you can't answer that question in terms of dollars. It means nothing in terms of dollars. You've got to look at it in terms of something that's real, something that lasts, something that holds value. And one thing I wanted to comment on that you said before when you talked about all the lies and the fakery and the manipulation and everything that's been going on, then we got to jump to this new system that's trusted. there's one more step in between you forgot about, and that's the pain part, where the caged, cornered animal lashes out. And we've seen that happen from the US and other empires. The late stages of empires are very volatile. You also talked about maybe we're not going to have a peaceful November. Hopefully we do. Hopefully cooler heads prevail, but the tea leaves don't look good at this point as far as how our populace has reacted, especially when egged on by paid fomenters and agitators and organizations that are sitting back and just very glad to see people clashing with each other and in factions and being able to justify the state coming in and cracking down and imposing more restrictions. So we've seen that internationally in the past when any
UK,
countries,
yeah.
well, right, but I'm just saying over the past of the history of money in the last century, we've seen that when countries have decided that they're going to stop drinking out of the punch bowl, as you say, they got whacked pretty bad from those that were still in charge, and there may be an attempt or many attempts on the part of, trying to create a crisis that seems to be distractible enough to the population that you can say, oh well, we can't, we're not responsible for what happened financially here because look at this crisis we got to deal with, and there's when the crackdowns can come in.
Yeah, martial law, suspension of the elections. I mean, I
Mhm.
don't know, 20 million people in this country illegally certainly seems to do the trick. If 5% want to create chaos, that's a million people. That's bigger than a standing army, way bigger. And the chaos spread throughout the whole country. I'd like to hope I'm wrong, but yeah, I mean, is it really crazy to think this way anymore? I mean, who would have ever thought that we would live through a pandemic? Who would have ever thought that we would see the kind of things that we are seeing right now? I mean, it's unbelievable. Who would have ever thought that? I mean, all of the, I'm not going to go down the wokeness again. I keep talking about it, but it bothers me more than anything what's happened to this country, how it's slid. And to me, this is why I want President Trump to win. I don't think that we can fix what ails this country financially. Look, you got you got you got Trump talking about devaluing the dollar. You got him talking about imposing sanctions on countries that move away from the dollar, that want to cozy up with the BRICS. Those are the same mistakes we've made forever.
Mhm.
You got his VP talking about saying the same stupid things that Jared Bernstein says. Well, maybe it's not such a good idea to be the world reserve currency after all.
Mhm.
I like him. I think he seems like a smart guy, but I don't like that. I mean, it's been a privilege we should be clinging to, and we've done everything to lose it. And I think we have lost. I mean, you could argue that, I would argue the hegemony's dead, the supremacy's not, but that could be gone as soon as October if they issue the new settlement currency that will settle for energy in the unit, which is 40% gold backed. And I did an interview with Vince Lancy, smart guy, and he says, yeah, wouldn't be surprised to see Russia and China back their currencies by gold too. That's why they're not telling us how much they have. So it comprises the majority of the currency within the 60% in the unit currency basket. 60% currency, 40% gold, held within the borders of the countries that mint these tokens. So they don't have to send their gold to Beijing or Moscow or any central authority. It is not a BRICS currency. It's a settlement cryptocurrency traded over Mbridge. And they all get their own monetary autonomy, but they get to hold their gold in their own borders. And that's why you've seen over 40 countries bring their gold back from the Bank of England and the New York Fed, which has always given access to the COMEX and the LBMA. But over the last 100 days, the cumulative volume in Shanghai, both the metals and the futures exchange, is up over 200%. And now has a greater volume than the COMEX does. It's the number 2 most influential metals exchange on the planet. That's what will happen when these exchanges get exposed as being Bernie Madoff, as being a scam, as being massively rehypothecated and fractionally reserved, where the LBMA can trade up to 2.9 billion ounces of silver per day. That is 3.5 times annual global mine supply. Really? That's 10 times more than the silver they say they have available that isn't encumbered. There's 800 million ounces there. Supposedly 500 million ounces belong to the ETFs. So there's 300 million ounces and they're trading 3 billion ounces per day. Interesting. So when you talk about these exchanges being, I think, will be exposed for what they are, That's when we will see price being set in places like Shanghai, in places like Moscow, in Dubai. The head of the Shanghai Gold Exchange in 2015 said, when China is able to speak at the table, the real price of gold will be observed. They know what we're doing. The new BRICS Grain Exchange, the guy who's running it said, all of these commodities, we produce more than the West does, but we don't control the price. It's controlled on COMEX.
Mhm.
They know what we're doing, and they're using it against us. All of the commodities they are accumulating, and they're using the Western management, if you will, if you want to call it that, or manipulation against us. It will end badly the way all manipulations do. The question is it the commercial banks that go down or the managed money? My bet would be the managed money, because one of these days, just like what we're seeing right now, you're going to see in the next COT report that the commercial banks have gone much longer, because when the hedge funds sell, which they've done massively, and cover, the other side of that is taken by the commercial banks, who will go long. And one of these days, they will just let it run and bury the hedge funds. And the attempted covering, naked covering, ain't going to look pretty. It will put hedge funds out of business and jack the price up to the stratosphere, is how it ultimately happened. But when that happens, COMEX and LBMA will be viewed as a scam, and the real price setting for all commodities, from grain to oil to precious metals to rare earths, they will all go to those exchanges. And you got Jim Willey talking about the prospect of the BRICS issuing a OPEC-style cartel for silver. And I believe that, because you have President Wadudu from, I can think of his name, but I can't, it'll come to me in a moment. Gosh. President Wadudu, it'll come to me in a moment, but he's calling for an OPEC-style cartel of all the rare earths in the Eurasian continent. Indonesia, he's the president of Indonesia, and he's calling for, a cartel in rare earths. We're going to get shut out, and that's going to happen, and that's why you need to be a contrarian right now. If you don't see this, I guess it's okay. I wouldn't blame you for not seeing it, because I spend 3 hours a day reading and watching podcasts in my free time. I mean, I'm a nerd, and it's like you don't get any of this on the Western mainstream media. You got to dig. So it's going to happen, and I've never been more convinced of it. And you started out this podcast by saying how fast things are spinning. I don't think we've seen anything yet. I really don't. We haven't seen that one event, whether it be monetarily, socially, God forbid, much worse, but something is going to happen that's going to wake people up. And I think it's coming.
We've got a ton of questions that have been
Let's do it. I got all the time.
The...
Well, I got 15 minutes. I'm on another one at 9. So I got 15 minutes.
Okay, let's try to hit these in rapid fire. I think this one you already talked about. Commander Covis Nerix Nevermore said, Andy, what are your thoughts about the Fed readjusting the price per ounce of gold to reduce the federal deficit?
I think it's going to happen. I really do. I think it's just too enticing for them to not do it. They'll all do it. It'll benefit everybody. Well, more so the countries that have been accumulating all the gold. But that's when Alistair McLoud's guesstimate that China has over 40,000 metric tons, not the 2,600 they tell us. That's why they're not telling us how much they have. They're waiting until it's time to, lift up your dress. And until that happens, sorry to be so crude, but until that happens, it doesn't do them any good to tell anyone how much they have.
Yeah. Now, you already mentioned this topic as well, but this is a specific question. Sean Guy says, hello, Andy. When the 30 to 45 new members get into BRICS this coming October, what is your possible time frame for a currency revaluation / gold revaluation?
Well, 59 countries have formally applied. That's what we find out from the BRICS meeting in Novigrad. Who knows how many they will admit? I think it has more to do. I mean, that is a big part of it, having that critical mass. But if indeed they ratify the unit, and which I think they will, like I said, the reason I've been talking about this currency for 3 years, the common settlement currency pegged to commodities, is because Sergei Glaziev has been saying it, and he's the Eurasian Economic Union financial minister. And the meeting at the Novigrad summit was between him, Putin, and Dilma Rousseff. the head of the BRICS New Development Bank, which is like the IMF. She's the former president of Brazil. She said this publicly. We've agreed in principle. We're going to have a meeting in September to ratify it with the intention, possibly, of rolling it out in October. Could it happen? Yeah, why not? That's when it would start happening. Can you only imagine if the dollar got clobbered heading into the election in November? I don't know. It would be interesting times, as the Chinese curse says. That's for damn sure.
Related question, CD Matt says, will the USA start buying gold like the BRICS, or don't the laws of reality apply here?
Well, you would think that they certainly should. I would argue, where did the $12 billion in gold that the Ukraine sold to fund the war, where did that go? Where did Saddam Hussein's gold go when they took over the country? And I'm looking for something right here, which I just read yesterday, which talks about how much gold that Gaddafi supposedly had. I'll see if I can find it real quick, but you would
While you're
think,
looking for that, I'll
yeah.
mention that in at least two or three of the recent interviews with Alistair McLoud, he's made the following statement that when the U.S. toppled these various countries that were supposed to have significant holdings of physical gold, that he said, well, then the Black Hawk helicopters took off and the gold disappeared with them. So those are
Yeah,
U.S.
WikiLeaks said that there was 143 tons of gold and the same amount in silver that Libya had when they were in. So, I mean, who knows how much we really have? And they wouldn't even let the Germans in to inspect the vaults in 2017 when they were making a stink for 3 years about give us back our damn gold already. And the gold they got back wasn't even the same bars that they sent them. I mean, there's a lot of empirical evidence out there to say that, you know, some would say we've leased all of this gold. Someone said, they changed it to even the way that they quote it in their holdings. They said it's in deep storage. Does that mean it's under the ground? Who knows what it means? All I can simply say is I truly do believe that they will indeed revalue gold, and it will go higher than people think. They have to do it, not only to help their balance sheets collectively, but in order to peg it 40% to a new currency and allow that 60% monetary latitude. You got to have gold at a higher price, and it will happen.
Yeah, it's been interesting because for about a decade at least, we've been hearing that there are only two paths forward for all these in-debt fiat countries, which is basically all of them, and that is either to inflate or default. And it sounds like this is a third option, which is revalue the gold and say, we balanced our books.
Or find a villain and have everyone dump dollars all together and blame it on Putin and Xi Jinping and OPEC. Saudi Arabia, how can they do it to us? And so you got four options. Richard Russell only spoke of inflate or default. I've been saying find a villain for 3 years, but this one to me, it just makes the most sense. It's with the least amount of pain. I mean, everyone's going to have the inflation pain, but it wouldn't be the reset pain where everything blows up, stocks, bonds, life insurance, insurance companies that are loaded in treasuries, the banks that are over leveraged, undercapitalized, all of that would blow up in an interest rate spike because everyone dumped dollars in treasuries. Who knows? But something's got to change. Let's just put it that way. You can't keep going $100,000 in debt per second, 24/7 without there being problems. And we have to sell upwards ends of 10 or $11 trillion worth of bonds every year just to keep the lights on, to pay the bonds that are coming due, and to funnel or to finance our irresponsible fiscal policy, our spending addiction, like heroin addicts who need to keep, buying their heroin to for their fix. It's crazy. So yeah, something's got to change by hook or by crook. It will.
Since we got to let you go in about 9 minutes, I'm going to bring up the weekly specials so that you can run through these and make sure people are aware if they want to grab onto something real, what we're trying to offer at a reduced price. Here we go, sharing now. Is that showing? Yeah, it should be.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that um, you couldn't ask for three items that I like more. I mean, I love pre-65 silver, and the half dollars or 250 over is probably the cheapest I've sold them for in 4 years. The Silver Eagles, my favorite way of owning silver, maybe next to Morgan silver dollars. The gold buffaloes, my favorite gold bullion coin, just aesthetically. Maybe, I like the Eagles utility. And that's worth mentioning real quick. Everyone always says, well, the Eagle's not as pure as the buffalo. Remember, the Eagle has 1 ounce of pure 24 karat gold, just like the buffalo. The buffalo has 1 ounce of gold, and that's it. The Eagle has 1/10 of an ounce of silver and copper alloy added to it, which decreases the purity to 22 karat, increases the net weight to 1.1. They both have the same amount of gold, but aesthetically, I love this coin. The Silver Philharmonics at 310 over. We have a bunch of those coming in this week. A lot of them. I don't remember how many we bought, but a lot. And from a standpoint of a 1 ounce coin from a government, as good as it gets. And then those Trump bars, which are a novelty, but very cool. That is exactly what they look like. They are that colorful. They come in minimum orders of 20, sheets of 20. Uh, who knows what that'll be worth someday down the road, but I do like those a lot too.
Well, I don't know if we have time to hit any other questions before we got to let you go. There was another question sent to
I
me.
got
In five
another
minutes.
4 or 5 minutes before I got to
Okay.
jump.
Speaking of Trump, Jack Redmond says Trump's got a favorable relationship with most world leaders. He's also a gold bug. Do you think he'll join up with BRICS and go gold-backed currency?
I don't know. I mean, I think if he wins, Judy Shelton will run the Federal Reserve. She is a gold advocate, a gold standard advocate. She's the one who has just come out and said that she wanted to sell 30-year bonds backed by gold to inspire confidence instead of relying upon the U.S. Government and its ability to make good in 30 years, have it redeemable in gold. So yes, I think he understands gold. I don't know that he'll join up with the BRICS. I don't know that we'll be invited. I'm not sure about that, but I do think you have the IMF. Kristalina Georgieva said a CBDC not backed by something is fiat. And that report that they wrote in early 23, gold as an international reserve, comma, a barbarous relic no more, question mark. The West knows about gold too. And now you have the senator saying we need to revalue gold. So gold is going to come back. And I think it will be the Apple and the Nvidia for moving forward. There will come a point where gold is what people want. And they say there's no bull market like a gold bull market because it speaks to your fear. We're motivated by fear and by greed. I'm not trying to scare anyone. It's a scary time. And if you're not concerned and not scared, well, then you have your head buried in the sand. And I would rather get out of the way of what's coming than be blindsided by it. And you can't get out of the way of what's coming if you don't see it. So that's why I do what I do. That's why I say what I say. I'm sure, there's always some people who are cynical, but I feel very strongly about it. I put my head down at night and feel like I'm doing my part, doing the best I can to wake people up. Yeah, I run a business that sells gold, but so what? Why can't a business and good intentions, why do they have to be mutually exclusive? And I feel that this is, for my family, I don't know of another place to put my money where I feel safe. I really, truly don't. And other than maybe really short-term treasuries, really short. But that's it. I don't know where else to put it, done again, and that's the truth.
You've mentioned to us in the past several times about the bleeding dry of the physical stockpiles in the COMEX and the LBMA, and yet we have a question from Joel Thomas. Why are the COMEX holdings so strong when there is a silver squeeze?
I don't. I think that it causes too much attention. I think that they've done that. They've drained it as much as they can, little by little. And again, they want to keep the game going. They being the rest of the world, that's like China and India, this consortium of countries that understands that it's about commodities. And if they're too overt about what they're doing, think about what we were saying earlier about the way that they're taking unrefined silver doré bars and concentrate and doing it in an effort to not let the price rise. And we were talking about it, you and I, in 2020, the rise of the others, the sovereign wealth funds that were draining the exchanges. And it's been talked about a lot. So I think what they're trying to do more than anything is to keep the game going, bleed the West from all of its commodities little by little. And if they're too obvious about it in any one locale, I mean, look, there's only 50, 60 million ounces in the registered category. That's not enough to even be a dent. India has imported 10 times more than that in the last 2.5 years just from the West. So yeah, I think that they're doing it, but if they do it anymore, it becomes a problem and it becomes too obvious.
Well, Andy, we were grateful for your being willing to pivot to being here with us earlier than usual on Wednesdays. That gives us more time to hang out longer with our viewers. Guys, thanks everyone for having been here with us. And please keep an eye on the newsletter that we send out to your email inbox. Make sure if you haven't signed up for that you sign up. It's completely free. Just go to libertyandfinance.com, put in your email address, click submit. Make sure you confirm on the confirming email. You'll get one email in your inbox per day with our latest interviews, including all those with Andy. And Andy, as always, on behalf of all of our viewers, all of our subscribers, just thank you for joining us here
Love you,
again on Liberty
buddy.
and Finance.
Pleasure is mine, Dunnigan. You're my brother, so I'm always happy to acquiesce any way I can, and I hope everyone out there has a good evening, and we'll look forward to catching up again real soon. And like I've been saying with you all along, it's going to be fun riding shotgun with you for the rest of the year and seeing how this all unfolds. I couldn't think of anyone I'd rather do it with. So I got another podcast to jump on
Very good.
right
Take
now
off.
at 9 o'clock. But in the meantime, I hope you and everyone else has a great evening. Thanks for having me.
Very good. Take care.
See you later.